All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to Making the Argument. I'm excited about this guest today because, well, I've seen her fight, and and when I say that, I don't mean on the street. I don't mean the street, not yet. I haven't seen her fight on the street yet, but I have definitely seen her fight in the octagon, and it is something to behold. But it was amazing to be able to fly out to Vegas with my son, with the good Hamilton, and we went out there and we had a chance to meet Miesha Tate. And it's amazing because if all you knew about her was that she was an incredible UFC champion, that would be impressive enough. But when you start to learn more about kind of her journey, how she got started down this path, about her relationship with her husband, her kids, and the work that she's starting to do now on her podcast, Built for Growth, again, it just makes the entire story all that more impressive. And so today, we're going to have Miesha actually explain what it was like to go from the girl who was wrestling in high school all the way to become the Bantamweight champion at UFC and beyond that, and really to share some more stuff about finding your identity, not just in your profession, but in your family as well as other things. So, Miesha, thank you very much for being on today.
Oh man, what an introduction. No, I appreciate it. And it was my honor to take you guys around the Performance Institute, even though you did decline any future opportunities for us to get on the mat together. But but maybe I'll get you in for just a strength and conditioning workout.
Tell the audience a little bit about what it was like. Like, why did you get in? Why did Miesha Tate decide, you know what I want to do? I want to fight for a living. Like, tell us a little bit about your upbringing and kind of what got you into combat sports.
Gosh, I don't know if that was ever even a conscious thought, as crazy as that may seem. I really feel like my whole journey was it must have been divine intervention. It had to be destiny finding me. And all I did was just simply say, yes, I'll try it.
Hmm.
And that really was, I think, the deciding factor. I didn't have this vision. I never wanted to be a fighter growing up. I wasn't a violent kid. I never got in street fights. Minus one in the third grade that I didn't start, and I made the little boy's nose bleed. Okay, but other than that, it was purely self defense. Other than that, I was always the person. I was like, I will walk away from a fight, and I always tried to maintain that sense of peace and, control in my life. But I ended up going out for wrestling when I was a freshman in high school, and I did that because I wanted to play a sport and they didn't have women's basketball.
Hmm.
So, I mean, excuse me, they had women's basketball, but I didn't want to play basketball. It's like, really, it's really important to know the things that you're not good at. But my friend Sharon suggested, hey, you want to go out for wrestling? So they don't have girls wrestling. What are you talking about? Are you crazy? And she's like, well, it turns out that if they don't have it in this good old state of Washington, that they can't tell you that you can't join the boys team. And I said, got my wheels turning a little bit. Went home, said, Mom, I want to go out for wrestling. What do you think? She said, well, I'm not going to tell you you can't do it. Don't think you're going to like it. And here's the deal. Do not tell your dad.
Oh man! Wait. All right. So you could. All right. So you couldn't tell dad. Did you not tell
Yeah,
dad when you first joined?
I did not tell dad.
Oh man.
I, I
Wait. And
didn't. I didn't
dad
tell
was
dad.
military, right?
Yeah, my dad was military. So not at that point, but he was former military,
Okay.
absolutely. And I could only imagine looking back now, which at the time I lacked the foresight to be able to understand why this would be difficult for a father to envision his 15-year-old daughter on a mat wrestling with you know, high school male boys in, singlets. Not that we practiced in singlets,
Yeah.
but I did compete against, males in singlets. So I couldn't understand that. That was way over my head. So, I want to do this. I don't care. So we didn't tell dad. It might have even been after the entire first season, if memory serves me right, that we still kind of didn't really let dad in on the secret. Dad worked long hours. He was
Oh my
busy.
god.
He was a moving he worked for a moving company, which he still does actually, by the way, but now he's the vice president, doesn't break his back anymore. So at the time he was busy hucking furniture around the US. And I loved it. I went, I'll tell you what, my first day, I got my butt kicked.
Uh-huh.
It was not a good day for me. But it was great in the fact that I was just so intrigued. It was the most difficult thing in my young 15 years of life that I had ever put myself with the task of doing.
Mhm.
And because it was so challenging and because I sensed right away they wanted to get me to quit, And so it was like my stubborn nature came out and also my passion came out and aligned in this way that I was like, I'm coming back tomorrow. I was like, the law of diminishing returns says I'm going to get good at this fast if I just keep showing up because I suck real bad right now. And I did, I just kept coming back and I loved it. And I took great satisfaction in the fact that they could try to make me quit, but they couldn't.
Yeah.
They could not make me quit.
So were there any other girls on the team?
Just my friend Sharon.
Okay.
Yep. So her and I kind of buddied up. And she and I wrestled. We're mainly partners. We tried to be anyways. At first, they put us in with the best wrestlers on the team. They separated us. They really tried to get us to quit.
Yeah.
By the way, she hung tough too. Until her junior year. And for whatever reason, I can't remember, she didn't go out her junior year. And I remember being so upset at her because I'm like, you're going to leave me alone on this team of guys. And who am I going to train with? Because she was my main training partner. It was the best thing that ever could have happened to me.
Really?
I had to wrestle with only the guys on the team, being the only female to show up and wrestle. But I started to, in my very analytical brain, I love to analyze things, probably why I'm such a student of jujitsu, because I love the analytics that go into this sport. It's like playing physical chess, as you know, because you train in it. But for other people who don't train in it, it's like a high pressure game of chess, but with your body. And it's so fun to problem solve all the situations. But I was by myself on this team, felt very alone, and I started to think and try to notice what the differences were between the way I did things and the way the guys did
Mm.
things. And I was like, you know what? When they shoot in and they blast through my hips, like if I wasn't there, they'd run a hole in the wall. And I said, okay, I need to be more like that. So I know I'm physically different, but I can be more explosive.
Mhm.
I can be more aggressive. I can be more of the things that is clearly making them successful. But I'll tell you what, it wasn't until Sharon was removed from the equation that I really started to distinguish because every day I was only wrestling with the guys. And that elevated my game tremendously.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time of the show where I once again remind you that Good Ranchers has got your back for all of the best American-raised beef, pork, poultry, and wild-caught seafood. And they delivered right to your door. What a deal. What a deal. Now, if you go to the website, if you go to goodranchers.com and you put in promo code Nick, they're going to add a little something onto you. And that is when you sign up for one of their subscriptions, they're going to give you a free ham. Who doesn't want free ham, right? All the time. All the time I want free ham. So go to goodranchers.com, put in promo code Nick, sign up for one of the incredible deals that they have available to you. Again, Tina and I use it all the time. We love Good Ranchers. It is delicioso, right? And again, for this limited time offer, you're going to get a free ham to go with it. So goodranchers.com, promo code Nick, go check it out. So so you wrestle throughout high school, and we were talking before. So it's not like you were winning championships and guys wrestling in high school, but
No,
but it was
not at all.
so. But it was a good experience. You thought it challenged you, and you enjoyed the difficulty of it, the intellectual side of it. So what did you do post high school in order to continue that? Because again, this is one of those things where once you get out of high school, sometimes it's hard to actually stay involved, but you go into college, and so are you wrestling there?
So I didn't wrestle in college. I found a mixed martial arts club sport in college. And again, it was one of those things where my friend was like, "Hey, you should come and check out this mixed martial arts club sport." And I said, no. I was like, "No, thank you. Like, what do you mean?" First of all, she was wearing like a karate suit,
Yeah,
and I was
gi.
like thrown off by that. Yeah, it was. Is the karate gi? Is it called the same thing as the jujitsu gi? Because they're not exactly the same,
No,
but
I
I
think
think
they're
they're
different,
called
but
the
I
same
think
thing.
they're both called a gi. But yeah,
Yeah, but they're slightly
yeah,
different. But anyway, so she was karate, and I was like, "Look, I am not. I don't do that, and I'm not putting on that outfit, and I will be so out of my element." I was like, "No, thank you." And I was thinking at the time, I don't have any desire to hit anybody, nor do I have any desire to get hit in the face.
Mhm.
Hard no. But then she came back and she kept at me for whatever reason, and I was like, you know what? Let me just go and try it. She told me that these were mostly all former high school wrestlers, anyways. I was like, all right, well, I'll just check it out. I went on my first day and I learned how to choke people.
and you were sold.
And as you could imagine, I was sold.
Yeah.
I was like, "That's awesome. I love it." Still did not want to do any type of striking art at all.
Mhm.
So, I went and I continued learning jujitsu for a couple weeks, and then I got invited by the team to watch an amateur event, which some of the guys from the college now that I was friends with were fighting at, and I was like, okay, cool, I'll go. By the way, I went to Central Washington University in Ellensburg, Washington, and the fights were in Yakima, Washington, which
Oh,
is like
wow.
a 30-minute drive away.
Okay.
So I went to the fights, and I'll tell you, I had the most visceral reaction to these fights. My heart rate went up. I think I started like perspiring. I felt like I was a moth to a flame.
Mhm.
I just was so drawn to it. And it was just really my first experience with watching fighting. Now, my dad will argue this because he'll say, well, I watched fighting and it was on in the house. And this, I was like, well, I don't remember any of that, Dad. I wasn't sitting down with you watching fights. He's like, well, you saw fights before that. And,
Mhm.
I had the UFC on and I was a fan of it before you ever knew about it. And I said, well, I don't recall any of that. I clearly was so not into it that I didn't care. But watching these amateurs just pour their heart and soul out for free, mind you, just made me such a I don't know if a fan is the right word, but immediately I was compelled by this. And if destiny didn't seek me out again, as the crowd was leaving, I'm just kind of sitting there taking this all in, and I hear an announcement come on, and it says, if there are any females in the audience that are interested, we're having an all female fight card in 3 weeks. So please come down." And so I just walked my happy little self down there and signed up,
Really?
not
Just
knowing
like
what the
that?
hell I was getting, just like that,
So how
not
how
knowing
long
what I
had
was
you
getting
been
myself into.
so how long had you been training? So you wrestled for 4 years of high school, you go into college and you're not, wrestling there or anything like that, but you start to join this MMA gym. You go to an event because you know some of the people that are competing in it. Like, what is the time frame from starting in the MMA gym to signing up for your first amateur fight?
I would say by the time I had my first amateur fight, I probably had max 5 weeks of training. And this
Oh my
right?
gosh.
Stupid. I know. It was so dumb. And it's not even like everyday training. This was
Yeah,
like Tuesday, Thursday.
yeah.
But when I signed up for the fight, I tried to get more serious and I started going to this gym, Yakima MMA. And so I started going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But as you know, if anything that you want to do well, it doesn't help to have a lack of preparation. And clearly that was my biggest issue going into this fight is I knew how to wrestle. I did not know how to strike. I didn't know how to absorb strikes. There was so much of the striking art that I still didn't even understand. I really didn't understand Muay Thai. And
Mhm.
that was what ended up being my kryptonite. I in the first round, I went out there, I was calm, I took this girl down, and I remember thinking, "Whoa, that was easy." And I don't mean to be arrogant or anything, but
Yeah.
I was so used to wrestling these monstrous men, because I'm not a tiny woman either. It would have maybe helped me out if I could have been like a 103 pounder, who maybe you get to wrestle some of the guys that haven't gone through puberty yet. That was never the case for me,
Yeah,
right? Like my wrestling career started at 130 pounds.
yeah.
So most of these guys are definitely, having testosterone on their side and they're physically developing ways that have advantages over me. Um, so, anyways, I took her down and I was like, whoa, that was like the easiest takedown I've ever gotten in my life. And I think I probably forgot to even throw a punch in the first round. I think I just wrestled her
Wow.
because I didn't know how I hadn't understood what I was there to do. So I was so inexperienced. And then in the second round, I went out there and she put me in a tie clinch. I remember I came out throwing 1 2 1 2 1 2, just trying to close distance, trying to bum rush her. And she gets me in a Muay Thai clinch. You probably know what this is, right?
Mhm.
I'll try to describe it for the
Yeah,
listeners.
yeah.
But basically, if you grab someone's head and you put your hands behind their head and then your forearms come in front of their collarbone and then you touch your elbows in the front, so you've really got this kind of vice-like grip on their head. Well, then she begins throwing knees at me. And this is an doing air quotes amateur fight. It's amateur because it's not paid.
Yeah.
But there are no rules as far as distinguishing what is allowed in amateurs versus pros.
Mhm.
Now there's all kinds of safety regulations. They have puffy gloves. They have things to help amateurs not absorb as much damage. No, that was not the case. There was no shin guards, there was no knee pads, there was no puffy gloves, there was no headgear. There was no nothing. So one of those knees came flying straight at my face and it completely smashed my
Oh,
nose.
wow.
So I remember the crunch and I remember thinking, I've got to get this girl down. Bam, another knee comes, crunch, smashes my nose again. And I think at this point, I'm driving so hard into her, I slide down to her ankles. And since she can't really knee me anymore, she kind of gets a foot out, she spins around, and she kind of gets on my back.
Mhm.
And I, in this moment, am sitting there on my elbows and my knees, and I'm trying to defend a little bit as she's trying to get the rear naked choke in, right? And I'm just taking all of this in and I'm watching a steady stream of blood pour from my nose and make a bigger puddle of blood in front of my face. Like I'm watching this puddle grow. And I remember at one point thinking, I have to change the tides of this fight. If I lose in the striking, and it's a quick thought, I don't think that I conceptualize all of this. But I think this is the only time in my career that I ever recall losing my temper. And I got pissed that she was on my back. Like she might outstrike me, but she will not out wrestle me. And so I just started bucking her and like hula hooped her kind of down beneath me.
Yeah.
So now she's in the guard position and I'm mad. And I remember standing up in front of her on my tippy toes and raining down punches from that point. And there's blood all over her, all over me. It was quite graphic and gruesome. And that was where round two ended. I think the rounds were like 3 minutes, two,
Wow.
3 minutes long. And I went back to my corner and I thought, where did my coach and corners go? Because the people that I saw in front of me looked more like a ghost
Mm.
than like any like they were a shell of a human. They didn't know how to react to
Yeah.
this. Women's MMA. This is back in 2000. I would date myself now. Back in 2006. So women's MMA was not real. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't. We didn't see women taking this kind of damage, and they kind of panicked and they threw in the towel.
Your team
And I'll
did?
never forget my team did.
Oh,
Yes. Because I mean, my nose was absolutely, disintegrated, but I also I was bleeding. They couldn't stop the bleeding, whatever. So they threw in the towel and I will I would love to have this conversation with her now. Liz Posner was her name, or Elizabeth Posner. And I don't know how to find her. I've tried to. But she had the look of relief on her face. I swear that both of us knew that I was coming for blood in that third round. Like, I had taken her best shot, and I had absolutely turned the tides back in my favor after being having my nose obliterated, and I knew what I was there to do. It
Yeah.
was much different than the first round. In the first round, I didn't really realize I was in a fight.
Mhm.
I controlled the round. Nobody really took any damage. A lot of lay and pray. Second round, smashed my nose, and then I turned the tides and I was winning again. We never got the third round, but I'm so curious if that was, accurate of because it looked like to me that she was like, "Whoo, thank
Yeah.
God.
Well, because
I don't
that
have to do
was
a third
it
round."
sounds like that's where you like you flipped the switch.
I did. I think that was where the fighter was born.
Okay. Wow. So that happens. Were you pretty upset with your corner?
I was definitely upset with my corner because I knew I was going to win in that third
Yeah.
round. And
What was that
I look back
conversation?
on it.
What was that conversation like with him?
It wasn't really a conversation. It was just a decision that was made, and I didn't really feel like I was a part of making that decision. I think and this is not to fault men in any way, but I think naturally there's kind of this hierarchy which, I also believe in and I am fine with this in my relationship. I try to, give Johnny that respect of being the man of the household, but I think that this translates over sometimes in sport as well. And
Mm.
I think in this case, they felt like they had a job to do to protect me
Mhm.
and it wasn't a conversation. So I think they did what they felt was right and what they felt was the best, not necessarily what without my opinion or what I agreed with.
No, no, yeah, no, I get that. I guess what I'm wondering is what was the conversation after they had made that decision and you're realizing you're not gonna get to go in to have your 3rd round? I mean, were you just
Oh yeah.
furious with them? I mean,
I didn't have the confidence to be
mm,
furious with them. I was furious inside.
got it.
I was still very much just a young 19-year-old girl, and I didn't feel like I had the authority to just scream at them and say, you guys effed up.
Yeah.
It's like, well, they're the coaches, like they know the best. And so I'm questioning why I feel so conflicted. And it more went in an internal battle with myself, thinking, is there something wrong with me? Like what do I have to do to rectify this? And that's kind of what I left with, was I knew that I wanted to fight again, and I believed that I could do better if I prepared the right way
Yeah.
and, with more time, obviously.
So this is your first amateur fight. How many more amateur fights are you going through before this becomes, how long does it take you to realize that this is something that you want to do, not just from an amateur level or maybe from a competitive level, but this is something that you really want to dedicate a significant portion of your life to?
So it would have been, if I fast forward after that fight, I won my next 6 fights as an amateur, and then we got a call to turn pro, which was basically the difference of getting paid or not paid. That was the only difference. Again, the rules otherwise were not different.
Yeah.
And I said, let's do it. So we flew to Evansville, Indiana. I fought a single night tournament that night. So I fought 2 fights in one night, and this is very nutshell version of this, but I fought my first fight and I won. We actually ended up going an extra round though. We went 4 rounds, crazy. It's still nowhere documented online. You will not see a fourth round. You'll only see 3 rounds, but it was against Jan Finney. And then I fought Caitlin Young, and she kicked my head into outer space, complete knockout. You guys can go back and watch these fights. There's more to it. I promise it wasn't just super one-sided. I tried, but anyways, yeah, she beat me. I got knocked out. I have to take that one on the chin. And then my next fight was against Elena Beef Maxwell, very beefy. And I was up a weight class at 145 pounds. And I was going to San Jose, which was her hometown, and fighting in Strikeforce, which she was signed to and I was
Oh,
not.
wow.
So if you're picking up what I'm putting down, that means that I was brought in to lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had just been knocked out by a kickboxer who was less accredited on paper, at least, than Elena Maxwell. She's a two-time K1 kickboxing world champion. I'm a 135 pounder. She's a 145 pounder. I'm meeting her up a weight class, and I'm coming to her hometown. So all odds were against me to win that fight. But I went down there and I did win. And I got offered a contract by Strikeforce. And it was a multi-fight deal.
Wow.
So I was offered, I think it was a 3 fight contract. And it was the first time that I was actually making a little, and I'm talking like a little bit. I think my first fight contract, I think, was either starting at 1,500 or 2,000 and $2,000.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
what I was making per fight.
See, yes, I think people have this idea that once you get into the professional side, you're like, oh, Mercedes Benz and first class tickets, and it's, I remember Luke and I were
So
talking. I was like, buddy, you got to remember when they're getting paid for that. There's staff involved, and there's coaching, and there's a lot of other expenses. Not to mention what
so
Uncle
many
Sam takes.
expenses.
Yeah,
So many expenses. And even to be a pro, it's like I could never poo-poo the money that I've made. I'm very grateful, especially as a woman in a sport, to be able to have some equal opportunity and make enough to, you know, uh, own my house, own my car, have a living, hopefully my future mostly provided for. I still think that I'll need to make income. I don't have quite enough in the bank to
hmm
just retire today. But but I did, I did well, I think, and I'm happy with where I'm at. So yeah, it's all those different things. There's something else I want to say now. I don't remember. You keep talking and maybe I'll think of
Okay.
something.
Well, so you win your first championship with FCF. What was
Mhm.
that first championship fight like?
So freestyle cage fighting was in Oklahoma, and it was a regional show. And I came in and I fought a local girl again, and I won. I think getting the championship was maybe the fight when I won by phantom choke, which has been one of my favorite chokes. You know the phantom choke, Nick?
No.
You know that one?
Mm-mm.
They also call it the Von Flu. Maybe you know it under that name. There's
No.
all different kinds of names for it. But basically, if somebody holds onto your head as you're taking them down and you can pass to the opposite side, so you pass their legs,
Mhm.
they think they're gonna still get some guillotine, but their legs are no longer involved. You're in side mount, they're holding your head. Then you kind of like make them stay holding your head. And you can initiate a choke with your shoulder in their throat, and
Oh,
they can't
okay.
get their arm out.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah.
can't get their arm out at that point. So I remember getting that was one of my favorite chokes at the time, and it was a great experience, to win, even though it was still more of a regional show. But then I went on to Strikeforce, eventually to capture the title there against Marlis Kunin as well, and kind of just kept climbing. But I certainly got my fair share of knockdowns,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
along my journey.
Well, yeah, in a strike four, you were like what, 12-2 when you won the Strike Force champion. So I mean, 12-2. I mean, that's a heck of a record. What was it like? I mean, you're still doing Strike Force, and then what was it like to transition from Strike Force and then UFC, and then of course, I mean, you were the bantamweight champion for UFC. Was did you always see UFC as kind of the pinnacle?
Yes, I did, but I also didn't see it as an option
Mm,
because women were not allowed into the UFC until 2013.
mhm.
And I got my contract with Strikeforce in
Yeah,
2008. So for the longest time, Dana White was shouting from the rooftops with any microphone he could find to say women's MMA will never be a part of the UFC.
mm,
It was a big question, and the media kept asking, will women ever fight? Never, never fight. And I remember listening to those interviews and not feeling um, held back by it, but feeling like you haven't seen me fight yet.
yeah,
And I'm not typically, I don't think I'm an arrogant person. I don't think. But I remember thinking this silently to myself because I believed in myself. And I learned something really important as a young girl in wrestling. When I was 15 and I joined the wrestling team, and then by the time I graduated, I had worked so hard and relentlessly. I'm telling you, like at the end, when we would run our conditioning laps, I would be making all the guys mind their P's and Q's because if they were slacking at all, like I was passing them,
yeah.
like a lot of times guys be stuck in wind and they kind of look over and they're like, oh, wait, I can't let the girl beat me. I'm like, I will beat you if you don't try your best,
Yeah,
believe me. Um, so I won the coaches award by my senior year, and that goes out to one athlete that really embodies what it means to the team to be an exemplary wrestler, which I was not competitive as far as like the males go. I did really well when I wrestled females.
mhm,
I won my state championship my senior year when I competed against females, but as far as the guys go, it pretty much count me as a loss. I'll try not to get pinned, kind of thing.
yeah,
But it taught me that perception can be changed. And it also taught me like these guys are not bad guys. They just have a preconceived notion about where they've been taught and thought that women belong and what they're capable of. And they just truly didn't believe that a woman could do that or could hang through those workouts or could be like the guys. But once I proved that, all became like a brotherhood to me.
mhm,
Became my comrades, my protectors, my brothers, and I learned that, oh, okay, if I just show up every day and I work hard, I know that I can change the mind of anybody. So show me the man and I will show you I can change his mind.
mhm.
um and it was the same thing, that thought process, when I said, well, he hasn't seen me fight yet.
Yeah,
It was just because I knew that if I could get in front of Dana, that I could show him that there was a female out there who was working hard and developing talent and could deliver on the aspects I think that they would need to bring females to the UFC. So lo and behold, after I won my Strikeforce title against Marlis Kunin, my first match was against Ronda Rousey,
mhm,
which to this day we still have the biggest documented rivalry ever in combat sports for women.
yeah,
So it was my fight against her that got Dana White's attention and said, I think there's something here.
yeah.
Maybe I should reconsider bringing women to the
Well,
UFC.
no, and you
And
and Rhonda really are the two people that, I mean, convinced Dana White. That's the bottom line.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I give her so much credit too because although we won't probably be having any tea parties anytime soon. I am so grateful to have had a rival like her.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody has that. There's a real lot of really talented people out there that never have the adversary that's necessary to push them to the next level and to elevate the sport. And she did that. So, yeah, I can look back at it and say I'm so grateful for having somebody who lit that fire under me, who pissed me off, who just drove me to try to be my best. And I never did get the best of Rhonda. She beat me both times that we fought, but man, I learned so much. And it's so character building to have to lose in the most important moments of your life and find out how to come back.
Yeah.
It develops a resiliency that I think is like the wind to the trees. If the trees don't have wind, eventually they get so big and heavy and they just fall over because they never developed strength to resist anything because they didn't have wind. So, for me, I think Rhonda was the wind for me, and she elevated me and she elevated the sport. And it did end up being our fight that changed Dana White's
Yeah.
mind. And yeah, I'll never forget that call that he gave me afterwards. I was like, Dana White's calling my phone right now. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And he gave me a big bonus, which I think was more than I had ever been paid cumulatively
Wow.
in my entire career. I made more money in that phone call with Dana White. So I'm grateful for that. And then knowing that, hey, women are coming to the UFC because at that time, Strikeforce was being dissolved.
Yeah.
So we knew that the UFC was buying Strikeforce, but we were totally in the dark about what was going to happen to the athletes, male or female. But you could kind of assume that at least some of the male athletes would transfer over. We had no idea if the females had any kind of future because at that time, Strikeforce was where it was at. They were promoting women's fights. They were doing main events.
Yeah.
Gina Carano versus Cyborg, it was
Yeah.
huge. It did big, big, big numbers. It was the number one watched fight over any other athletes, which were males headlining at that point. So the proof was there. It just, I think, took Dana a little time to wrap his head around it.
Well, and I think what's interesting too is that, I mean, it was a heck of a fight, and yeah, you guys had you guys had an incredible rivalry. One of the things I've liked about UFC in general is that I have felt like there was a certain level of respect among fighters within UFC that I don't see in in every combat sport or in every sport in general. Um, and you know, so that's a tough fight. She gets the bantamweight UFC Bantamweight championship on that one, but then you go like 4 months later, you're back in fighting again, right? I think it was you're fighting again. You win that one. You win your next one. You win your next one after that. I think you won like, what is that? Let me look it up. Would you win like?
Oh yeah, I
You win
think
4 fights in a row after that, all within the space of about a year and a half, right?
yeah.
So that's the other
Yeah,
thing that
that's
blows my mind is
right.
the quick turnaround on this.
That was crazy. If I look back at that now, I'm like, man, I wish I had the ability to recover that fast now. The blessings of the 20s, when they say the youth is wasted on the young, they ain't kidding.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I fought very quickly after that fight with Ronda, which was surprising because in that fight, for those of you that have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you that haven't, again, I will get a little graphic. I was in an arm bar
Yeah.
and I just refused to tap.
Yeah.
And so the arm completely, my elbow at the elbow joint bent 90 degrees the wrong direction, in which I dislocated my elbow. I had grade two and three of the tricep and bicep. And I avulged the tendons from the bone, which basically means where the tendons attach, ripped two chunks of bone off on either side.
Jeez.
So it was a pretty serious injury, although I narrowly escaped surgery because luckily the bone that ripped off with the tendon grew the tendon back into place. So if it had ripped clean off the bone, I would have been in a worse situation. So I got I was blessed in that situation, I guess,
Oh,
to come out of that relatively unscathed. I mean, I was still hurt, believe me. It took me a long time and to be able to recover from that, but I was so diligent in my recovery and then just trying to fight again as soon as possible.
I couldn't yeah, that arm bar when you watch it, it's like, oh my, that is not supposed to been that way. Um, I mean,
Nope.
it looked horrendously painful. And then for like 4 months later, for you to be back in and winning matches, and then several months after that, winning another one, and then you get your shot at the title against Holly Holm, who had beaten Ronda, to take the title. What was it like to get that call that you were going to get that shot?
Well, oh, so let me tell you this. So I was actually supposed to get the rematch against Ronda when Holly fought
Mm,
Ronda. That was supposed to be my fight. So I had worked myself back up to the number one contender, and then it was Jessica, I, and myself. We fought to eliminate one of us to solidify the number one contender position. So after that fight, Dana was like, "Yeah, Miesha will be next in line." So at this point, I only had one fight against Ronda,
mhm.
none in the UFC. So then everything kind of goes quiet. I don't really hear anything, and I'm kind of asking the UFC. And then I wake up one day to see the announcements that Holly Holm is fighting
Oh,
Ronda.
okay.
Yeah, that Holly Holm is fighting Ronda. So um, I remember just being so upset, and I, was frustrated. But in hindsight, it all worked out. And forgive me if the details of that are a little foggy. But that was the gist of it. That I wanted this rematch with Ronda, and I hadn't got it. But I went on to, Holly went on to beat Ronda, and then I ended up beating Holly.
Yeah.
So it worked out.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you probably know and have perhaps wondered yourself, I get asked a lot on how many mugs I own. Well, the good news is you can find out in our store where we actually sell those mugs, along with some other accoutrements you might be interested in. For instance, if you're just a parent doing your best not to raise communists, we got a mug for that. If you're the sort of person that would like the government to know that if they tread around, they will in fact find out, we have both a mug and a shirt for that. Or if you're the sort of wife that just needs to once again remind her husband how lucky he is to have a wife that's hotter than his coffee, well, we've got you squared away as well. We've got gifts for mom, we've got gifts for dad, we've got gifts for kids. You got a child that's an unsocialized homeschooler? We've got a shirt for that. So go to the link in the description and sign up right away, because we're about to have our Black Friday special and you can get 15% off the entire store. So go down there, support the show, and show everybody how funny you are and how much you love them. So at that point, at that point, obviously you're at the pinnacle, right? You're at the pinnacle of your career at this point. You've won the bantamweight UFC championship. And I remember talking to you about this when we were at the facility, and it was interesting because obviously it's an incredible accomplishment and something that every right to be proud of, but to listen to you describe it, um, it wasn't what I think most people would expect. So can walk us through a little bit of what it was like to win that championship, but to also kind of struggle with what that meant?
Oh, okay. I was wondering. I was like, which part? Where did I mislead you? It was great. No, you know what? I think the truth is that I was a very broken person, and I'm still a very flawed person, but I've worked really hard on fixing the things that were broken within me. And when I tell you, way back when I was 19 years old, and I was upset that they called this fight, I lacked the confidence to say anything different. I didn't have my own voice, and I was very susceptible to being influenced, or whatever ways. I hadn't found myself yet,
Mhm.
just put it that way. And I thought winning would fix everything. I thought winning the belt that was the ultimate goal. So if I did that, everything was going to be great. It wasn't great. It felt great to win it, but a week later,
Yeah.
I was already realizing I still had all the same problems, still had all the same trauma, still had all the same issues. It fixed nothing.
Mm.
Felt great, but once the high of that was gone, I realized that I'm still depressed. I'm still struggling in all the same ways, and it didn't fix it. And
Mhm.
I think sometimes people think if they had more money,
Yeah.
they'd be happier. If they had more fame, they'd be happier. If they uh you name it, drove a nicer car, had a bigger home, had more things, had more name brand stuff, that they would feel happier. If they could finally just make this amount of money, that would fix all their problems. It doesn't fix your problems. None of that will fix the issues if you don't know who you are inside. Because when you have to find out who you are when you strip everything away.
Mm.
Like, who am I if you take everything away from, all my accomplishments, all my physical possessions, if you take all that away, like, who is Miesha Tate? Like, and I'm like, look, I am a God-fearing woman, like, unapologetically American. I have love for my family and the people around me, and even people who I've never met. I have love and empathy for those
Well,
people.
let me ask you this though, because I want to talk about how that came about. Because again, I remember this being something we talked about, and it was something that really struck me as you were starting to describe it. Because, in March of 2016, you're the champion, right? You've achieved it, and it's amazing because I have talked to people before where they have been striving for something for a significant portion of their life. They've poured everything into it. They've sacrificed. They've experienced pain. They've experienced upset, and then they get it. And kind of like what you were just talking about, there's almost this feeling of course, there's a feeling of excitement and accomplishment, of course, but there's almost also this feeling of this wasn't like I thought this was going to be the thing that once I got it, like okay, now it's all worth it. Now it all makes sense. Now I'm better, and then it isn't. And I've had some people describe that sometimes that's actually the hardest point because you would put it on such a pedestal that when you achieve it and it doesn't meet the expectations, it almost leaves you thinking, okay, well, what now? Like, what's the next accomplishment? But then, and this is the tough part, but I want to get your take on it because in July, right, then all of a sudden, this is when you have your fight with Amanda Nunes, and now she's the champion. And the thing I'm trying to figure out here is it had to be tough enough to get something that significant, to achieve something that significant, to have earned it. Um, and then in July, now that's it, and it was great. It was great, but it didn't fix the things you wanted fixed. And now in July, somebody else has it. Like, where were you at that point?
Yeah, that was really rough for me. And I can now empathize with anybody who has made it in life in the majority of people's perception and still feels like if I've done everything that I wanted to do, if I have the money and I have the wife, the husband, the kids, I live a great life, and I'm still struggling with the demons of my closet, there's nothing that'll fix it.
Mm,
And although I don't believe that that's true, there is things to fix it, but it is not outside of you.
mm,
It's not the possessions, it's not the successes, it's not what other people think, it's inside of you.
mhm,
You have to go internal to fix and to resolve and to find. And when I lost my belt to Amanda, I was very far from figuring that out.
mm,
I was I had prior to that fight had exited a relationship that was nearly a decade long, and it was very toxic. I it was during that impressionable time in my life when I ended up with a man who very clearly defines a narcissist, and I struggled. I struggled in every way because for so long I remember him telling me, like, you will never find anybody who will love you like me. Like, you'll never find anybody. Basically, the message I took away was like, I'm not deserving of more than that.
mhm.
Like, you'll never find anybody who will love you. Um and that was my takeaway. So I really questioned my value outside of fighting. I really tied my identity to Miesha Tate the fighter and to my outcome that night
Mm,
when the fight was. And after I lost my title to Amanda, And then I lost my next fight to Raquel Pennington. I remember feeling so lost. And I almost had I don't really remember the fight against Raquel. By that point, I had gone so far down the hole that didn't really feel like there was anything illuminating my experiences. I was just going through the motions. Couldn't really see anything clearly. And I was in that fight, but I don't remember it.
Mm,
And I don't remember anything about that week. It's very foggy. But I think what I've learned about myself is that I use disassociation
mm,
as a way of coping when things were beyond the means of reason, beyond what anybody should have to endure. And that's one thing, I could speak from my experience as a woman. Like, we are strong and we are capable of enduring, especially emotionally. We can endure a lot, but we shouldn't have to,
mm,
right? That should be something on reserve. It shouldn't be something that's at the forefront of getting us through every single day. So, with that being said, I lose that fight, and um, I questioned whether I still had purpose in this life, whether I still had value, whether I should still exist.
mm,
I started to really have these deep, dark thoughts, and thankfully, I had enough of a relationship with God. I think that it saved me in that moment because I sure as heck didn't have much else.
mm,
I had alienated myself from my family. I'd alienated myself from a lot of my friends, and that was also contributing to the repercussions of being in a toxic relationship, a very controlling relationship. Where they don't want a lot of outside influence or anybody telling you otherwise. So it kind of like usually has to be somebody who's approved,
mm,
and I just couldn't see things very clearly. So I felt like I was in a dark room with, scared to move anywhere because I didn't know if I was what I was gonna run into. But it's like this little tiny crack of light, and you're just like, I don't know what's over there, but I gotta go that way.
yeah.
And that's kind of how lost I felt. I didn't know what was on the other side of any of this, but I knew I didn't want to give up on myself. I just didn't want to live like that anymore. And so I ran towards that piece of light. And what that piece of light was for me was um, I went on a road trip with my little 9-pound Chihuahua at the time. His name was Scooter, and I drove across the country and I drove up to the coast, up to Washington State, and I just tried to distinguish what things that even made me happy.
Mhm,
I didn't even know outside of fighting, and then I reconnected with family and friends and people I hadn't seen in years. Some family that I had never even really seen before. Some of my great aunts, and I sat down and I had lunches with them, and it started to piece me back together, which, reminds me how important community is,
mhm,
how important having those people around you who matter, who support you and love you, even if it's quietly and it's behind the scenes, or, whatever it may be. The relationship too, I think, with God was very diminished. It certainly wasn't a nourished relationship. I'm never going to claim to be a perfect person, but I do say if there's anybody out there who is struggling and you feel like you're missing something, it might be that.
mhm,
I would bet that it is that relationship with God. And that doesn't mean you have to be a part of organized religion, because church is you. You are the church. Wherever you are that person. And I think the spirituality of that is so powerful. And just knowing, for me, that there is something and someone out there, however you would define God in your life and energy, whatever it is, that has more control than you do, that you can kind of just like cue the song, Jesus take the wheel. Like, I don't have to hold
yeah,
on to this thing so tightly. Like, there's some thing in this energy in the system. If I just trust the process, I'll be okay. And I think that's what really brought me back to where I'm at today and all the things. And I retired at that point, was very lost. I contemplated if my life was worth living, and then I retired for 5 years. I met Johnny. We had two beautiful kids. We lived in Singapore for a year and a half. We got through the pandemic. I said, look, I want to fight again.
mhm,
And I came back, and this most recent fight that I had was by far my best performance ever, because I finally realized that it's not as simple as a win or a loss for me. I'm so much more than that. And I actually started devaluing a little bit what the stereotype is around winning and losing and saying, look, sometimes, sometimes, Nick, I would win a fight narrowly because it was more important for me to win than it was to be my
Mhm.
best. Not that I conceptualized that at the time, but I realized that just by focusing on winning made me really short sighted a lot of times. I would do just what I needed to win or be more sure safe than to be my best. Now, what I realize is I'm effort based,
Mhm.
no longer outcome based. Whatever the outcome will be, will be. Whatever my effort I put in is more likely to contribute to the kind of outcome that I want, but that's not where I focus.
I
I focus on what I do to get me to where I want. And even if it ends up not being exactly where I want, it's usually even a better place. Like I sometimes my goals are limiting,
Mhm. Mhm. I
right?
think
Like the goals are limiting.
that's a really I want to dive into that a little bit because that's an interesting perspective. I think that yeah I think that there's a I completely agree with this concept. I know like my relationship with Christ, that's where I get my foundational identity. And then everything else, the other things can be important. Like I get a great deal of identity from being a husband. I get a great deal of identity from being a father. I got an identity from being in special operations. Right, those were all components that were valuable to me. But you're right. It's that for me, it's that unchanging nature of the relationship with Christ, from which I know that there is meaning, that there is purpose, and that doesn't go away. And so, regardless of what the goal may be, regardless of what, because the idea would be is that if God forbid something happened to my, wife, I wouldn't be a husband anymore. If God forbid something happened to my
Right.
children, I wouldn't be a father anymore. Does that mean do I disappear? Do I cease to exist? And it's like, no, like, we are all of us, I believe, beautifully and wonderfully created in the image of God. And that idea of no, I always have purpose in that relationship with Christ and nothing can take it away. There's this element of assurance, and in scripture they actually talk about it, about the peace which surpasses all understanding. And it's interesting because a peace which everyone understands because you got all this stuff and there's no conflict and you're wealthy and you're happy and you're healthy and all this other stuff. That's a peace everyone potentially understands, right? But it's that peace which surpasses all understanding, where in the midst of the fray, you can be like, hey, I recognize this is bad. I can recognize this might not be a place I want to be, but I don't have any question about my identity or my ultimate purpose. And I think that allows you, that secondary thing you talk about once again fostering those relationships in your life that exist because people care about you as a result of who you are, not necessarily a particular goal you've accomplished or a title that you possess. When you are surrounding yourself with people that genuinely love you and want the best for you, I feel like it almost it's crazy because you're starting to explain this, and it's almost like on one hand it alleviates the burden of having to accomplish something to be worthy of like love or respect, but on the other hand
That's it.
it opens you up to achieve so much more because you're not bound by this need that, well, if I don't get this, I'm not worth anything.
That's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head, Nick. And it's such a liberating feeling within yourself because yourself and your soul become connected. You and yourself become connected again. And it amazes me how disconnected we are as a society, but I can see why because we're distracted by all the things that we think we need to do in order to be happy. And it's all external.
Mhm.
No, very little, if any, focus is taught to us by school, by even well-meaning people around us because they're also kind of indoctrinated with the same thought process that hey, it's all about what you do. But I say it's about who you are.
Mhm.
And when you do, if you take away every single thing in your life, that is the one thing that can never be removed is your relationship with self and or I believe we are all a piece of God, so that self relationship is also a relationship with God. Um, so for me, just understanding that means that I am invincible. I can never be defeated. I could lose a fight.
Mhm.
I could lose, loved ones. I could lose all these things, but my peace will never be questioned or disrupted. If somebody's angry and cuts me off on the highway and they're mad and they're having a bad day, you know what I think? Man, like I feel empathy for that person.
Mhm.
They haven't figured it out yet. Whatever they got going on in their life that's stressing them out, they just they haven't figured it out. They're not connected to self.
Mhm.
They're so, they're allowing these things to steal their peace. They're being reactive.
Mhm.
And when we are reactive to situations, that means external things control our emotional state. They control ourself. And think about that all the time. Like, you will not get me to be reactionary in a situation like that because I have my peace. And it's something that can't be taken. Once you have it, it's just it's an enlightening process. And I think it's a big part of the reason why in my last fight, my first round was a 10-8 round,
Mhm.
second round was a 10-8 round, and the third round was set to be a 10-8 round until I finished the fight with the rear naked choke. Never in my life have I done that before.
Mm.
And I was an underdog going into that fight.
Yeah.
I was a betting underdog because people thought that I was going to perform like I had before. But I'm telling you what, something clicked. Something clicked, and it's all these little pieces that you accumulate over time, and eventually, it goes from being a bunch of puzzle pieces to being something that looks like the picture that you want.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like I was collecting puzzle pieces for so long. And then finally, I kind of arranged them in a way that got me the outcome that I wanted, but not because I focused on the outcome, but because I focused on my effort and controlling what I can control right now. Not worrying about tomorrow,
Mhm.
no catastrophizing, bringing myself to this moment because this is the only one I can really control.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow,
Well, and
none.
yeah, I think that's interesting. The idea that because again, there's rules to a fight, and you can play it safe, and you can win by points or you can win by something else. But like you really talked a lot about focusing on wanting to not just win, but to be able to risk losing in order to be the best that you could be. Um,
Exactly.
and I think I think that's a powerful thing when you are when you're on some level when you stop competing with everybody else and you start competing with where you are right now in order to be the best that you possibly can be. I think there's something both liberating about that, as you said before, but there's also something that allows you to excel in ways that weren't possible when you were constrained by this other way of thinking about it. So that's
Yeah.
pretty great. I got
No,
one
that's
other
right.
question for you because you've given us a lot of time and I really appreciate it. But I got one other question for you because I got to we talked a little bit when we were talking before about how you and Johnny met, and obviously you're a mother of two now, and you're training for another fight. So
Yeah,
what is that like when because the kids go to the fight, right?
they do.
So the
Yes.
kids go to the fight.
And
What is that like? Because for them, your mom, right? Your mom, and then mom steps into this ring where someone else is trying to hurt her, and you're fighting back, and the whole deal. What is that process like with respect to conversations with your husband or conversations with your kids on? Obviously your husband understands. He's also very very competitive and very very skilled. Um, what's that like? Kind of explaining that to your kids.
Well, the best way I could describe it to them, and mind you, when I first came back, my son was just 1 years old. I was actually still nursing
Oh,
when I had my
oh
first fight
my
back.
god.
So yeah, I had to nurse my son before I went out and fought. So I mean, it's been a transformative journey. And kids, they change so fast that the
Mhm.
way that I first tried to explain it to them is so different than I would explain to them now. But my daughter was she was 3, excuse me, and she was old enough to know. And the first fight, I came home and I was not damaged.
Mhm.
My second fight, see, about maybe like 9 months later or something like that, I did get a laceration under my eye and a bit of swelling and some stitches. So when I came home, my kids were a bit taken back, and my daughter was like, "Does it hurt?"
Mhm.
And I said, "No, honey, it doesn't really hurt." And a lot of questions ensued, and I did my best to answer those. And then I let her be a part of the process.
Mhm.
I invited her to help me clean the stitches. I invited her to help me clean the band-aid and talk to her and just say, "Mommy, why do you fight?" And I think answering those kinds of thoughts of hers It's like, honey, I do it because I love it. For me, it's like how you play with your friends.
Mhm.
Like when you're playing and you're having a great time, you just really enjoying it. That's kind of what fighting is like for me. It's like having a play date, like we don't hate each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It is like having a play date
Yeah.
with another willing participant.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The next I can just imagine the call from the next play date. Miesha? Yeah. Yeah. Your
exactly.
daughter body slammed my little boy. Well, it's
Yes, well, I would say, what did he do to
that's
deserve it?
right.
My daughter's a wonderful, kind person who otherwise wouldn't start any nonsense.
Well,
So,
I got a chance to meet your daughter too when we were over at Randy Couture's gym, and yeah, just an absolute sweetheart. And was having a great time. Well, listen, Miesha, thank you very much. Tell everyone where they can follow you. I mean, gosh, most people already know, but let everyone know where can they follow you, and definitely tell us more about the Built for Growth podcast.
I appreciate that. So, look, Built for Me. Part of my journey in all of this, Built for Growth podcast is truth seeking.
Mhm.
I'm trying to do my best to navigate in a world, but I feel like social media is controlled in ways. I don't feel like that we can trust our governing bodies to have our best interest. And it's unfortunate, but I think it's the truth. And I'm looking for information so that I can pass that along, hopefully to the masses, and have doctors, personalities, experts, people, thought leaders. I definitely consider you in those categories, Nick, and I appreciate you being on my podcast as well. I thought it was very informative, especially learning about what men need and masculinity. It was one of my favorite parts about what we talked about because I don't think we focus on that enough. Men get such a bad rap these days for being toxically masculine, and I think that's just misunderstood. I think that masculinity is such an important, it is the backbone to a family, it is the backbone to our society. And I think it is a terrible thing to sit here and say, well, masculinity is bad. It's inherently bad. No, it isn't. It's good when it's used for good, and it can be bad if it's used for bad. But I think what's more important, rather than shaming masculinity, is to raise healthy masculine men.
Mhm.
And that is a part of my mission is to raise a daughter who knows her worth and a son who knows how to respect a woman's worth, and also knows his place in the masculine area, also being able to tap into his emotional side.
Mhm.
I think we handicap men sometimes by telling them, oh, that's crimes for girls, this, that, whatever. Emotions are human. They don't belong to anybody. We're going to have different ways to deal with them. There's no right or wrong, but I think emotion is human. So for me, this podcast is about informed and transformed journeys. And I want to share that with the people. I want to be as honest as possible. I want to be as candid as possible. And I want to seek the truth. So if you are interested in that, then follow me on Built for Growth. It's on Spotify, Apple, and you get it on YouTube. Wherever you listen to your podcast, it's the typical gamut of that. And also, I want to say one other thing. I have a newsletter that I'm really proud of, not because it's probably the best newsletter in the world, but because I don't use AI
Mhm.
to write it. I write it myself. Comes out every 2 weeks, and it's just really from my heart. And I am also a certified behavior change coach, so I really try to give insights and information about how you set goals and make that change, whether it be physical, emotional, or spiritual. There's elements on layers of really making long lasting change, depending if your goal is to get fitter, or if your goal is to feel more connected, whatever it is. I'm going to help provide you with the tools in that in my newsletter, and that's really easy. Subscribe at mieshatate.com. And you can find me on all the social media channels. It's mostly just at Miesha Tate. I think on X it's at Miesha Tate UFC. Just make sure that it's I before E,
Yeah.
Miesha, because if not, you'll probably get some fake account
Yeah.
with some dude over in the Philippines trying to
Yeah.
weasel you for money or something. So
Well, yeah, definitely go and follow. The other thing too, the plug I want to do for Built for Growth for you, if you don't mind, is I want to say that it's, a lot of people now are looking for information, and they're looking to actually hear good and genuine conversations. And the problem is that so much that we see within the media, so many of the interviews that we see look as if it's just a series of either gotcha questions or
Yeah.
just a bunch of it's baited ambush in the form of conversation. And that is definitely not what happens on Built for Growth. It is always wonderful to sit down and have a conversation with someone who is themselves incredibly accomplished, has gone through a lot, and to be perfectly honest, for a woman to ask a man, what do men need? That doesn't happen much anymore. And I remember you asking me that question very intently, like what does a man need out of X, Y, and Z, and us being able to talk about that. And again, nobody's going to tell Miesha Tate she's not strong, she's not capable of being independent or whatnot. So I think those sort of conversations where people get to watch someone who ask a question because they're genuinely curious as to what another human being thinks about a topic, as opposed to just setting them up for a retort. If you're looking for that kind of conversation, that sort of genuine back and forth, Built for Growth is a great place to get it. And again, other than me, she has some really good guests. So definitely go check that out. Well, Miesha, listen, our best to Johnny, our best to your family. Definitely hope to follow up in the future. And, again, we do have, I am accepting the challenge to go and do the strength training with you and Johnny some point. I'm just not getting on the mat. I'm just not getting on the mat.
You can roll it. You can roll with Johnny.
Oh yeah,
and I'll roll with your son if your son has enough gump.
yeah. Well, Miesha, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Again, please go check out MieshaTate.com. Go look at Miesha Tate on social media. Follow those pages and follow up. And also, get a chance, go over, take a look at Built for Growth. Give it a like, subscribe to it. I think you're really going to like the guests she has on and the questions that she has. It's a far-ranging. It's everything from kind of politics to fighting to combat to health to fitness. There's just a wide swath of things that are very interesting content. So once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next episode.